Hello, everybody. Welcome back into the Orbit Football Podcast today. As you can tell by my voice, still a little under the weather, fighting off this cold. I'm at the tail end of it. Unfortunately, though, Tyler got the worst of it. Tyler got a bit of that cold that I had that you could hear on our a recent episode that we recorded on Sunday. I was sick then. I struggled to get through that broadcast or that podcast, and now Tyler's got it. Tyler will unfortunately not be joining us here today for the Week 12 preview. I do have his picks, so I will be going over his picks. But we still got me. We still got Blake. We're still going to dive in, do some preview for Week 12. But before we jump into that, some things have changed since we last recorded on Sunday for the Orbit Football Podcast, and a couple more jobs have started to open in college football realm. The big one, the Mississippi State job, Zach Arnett. He's been fired there. Took over that job after Mike Leach unfortunately passed away. Was granted that job, and he has been fired. Didn't even make it a full season with Mississippi State. Mike Yurcich, the offensive coordinator for Penn State, he has been fired since the last time he was fired later in the day Sunday. We recorded earlier in the day Sunday, so we didn't really get to hint on that. But another couple more interesting things. Northwestern, they have made a decision with who they're going to roll with their head coach. They're sticking with their interim head coach right now. They're sticking with that. That's going to be their movement going forward. And another big news that's been circulating a lot recently is Chip Kelly. Regardless of the outcome, Chip Kelly, obviously the head coach at UCLA. UCLA this weekend taking on USC. The rumor right now is, according to, I believe it was Bruins report, it was a 24/7 affiliate for UCLA had reported that Chip Kelly, regardless of the outcome of this weekend's game, will be fired by UCLA come after this weekend. So a lot is currently unfolding in college football. Blake, I know you've got a lot of thoughts about the ever-changing coach carousel that we're going through right now, so I'll turn it over to you, and I'll get your immediate thoughts on this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to start first. Obviously, I was not on the Sunday show, so I got to get my A&M talk in here real quick. With Jimbo Fisher being out at A&M, I put out a couple of weeks ago on my Twitter at BV33 there that I believe that not even believed. I was 100% confident this job would come open. We heard some rumblings the week prior about maybe Jimbo would get another year at A&M. I never particularly believed it. This was always going to happen. Their recruiting class was starting to come apart, so you kind of saw that as well. But they have underperformed so heavily from what they should be able to do. A&M is should be one of the top programs in America, has the potential to be a top program in America, and is probably the best job in the country right now, and can attract really whoever they want. Jimbo just has not gotten the job done whatsoever there. An underperforming season last year at 5-7, missing a bowl. With that top recruiting class we've ever seen to brought in. Not a good start there. And then this year, they just never really clicked. So I was pretty confident going into this year that if they weren't a true contender for the playoff or for a title, or didn't at least look like one on the field, that he would be done there. And that's how it went down. I said, I think I put that tweet out actually during their bye week. I said that I believed he would be I was confident he would be fired, and that has come to fruition. So needed to happen. I had no doubt it would. It's just he just could not. They could not keep doing this. Everyone's going to bring up that $76 million buyout, and everyone kept bringing that up as a reason why it wasn't going to happen. Well, number one, A&M has almost limitless money there. They are potentially it's them or Texas for the wealthiest program in America in terms of what they're willing to put into football and athletics in general. And I think A&M probably at this moment in time has the edge in money just from kind of what you hear. It sounds like A&M can really just kind of throw money around without issue. But with that, what people missed a lot was that, number one, that money was going to have to be paid to Jimbo Fisher regardless. Fully guaranteed contract, obviously. So you can pay him, $10 million a year to run your program into the ground, or you can just give him the 76 to say, get out of town and we'll figure it out without you. And that's what the obvious decision was going to be. And along with that, all 76 doesn't come up front. I believe it's something around $20 million was paid up front. I think I think actually coming next week, he'll get that money. But then it comes out in $7 million increments, 7.fraction of a million increments over the next 8 years, I believe, actually. It goes till 2031. it lives out the rest of his contract there. So, it was never going to be paid up front. It was always going to be portioned out. So it wasn't as if it was going to be 76 up front. That wasn't going to be an issue. And like I said, you're going to pay the guy to get out rather than pay him to run the program into the ground, especially with what you can do there and what you can do there. It had to happen. So what comes next is what is next for A&M. Like I said, I think it's the best job in America at the moment, or it can be. It should be the most coveted job in the country. You're in a recruiting hotbed, especially there in East Texas. East Texas puts out some great football recruits. That's why you see LSU over there trying to poach a lot of them. Alabama, Ohio State's lived in that area for a long time in recruiting. So the recruits are there. Of course, you can hit all the state of Texas as well, but even right there in A&M's backyard, in East Texas especially, you've got the recruiting base, though. You've got the money, like I said, unlimited money effectively to hire anybody you want on that staff, anybody you can get there. You can have the best assistants in the country with ease. Um, that was part of Jimbo Fisher's downfall, I think, as well, is that he could have really had anybody in the country on his coaching staff and dismissed on those hires and really was kind of hiring kind of a good old boy friend that worked there. It's kind of what you saw with Ed Orgeron's downfall at LSU was that really hit on, guys he knew, guys he liked, instead of going out and getting guys that could win football games. And that's what Jimbo Fisher kept doing there. He went out and got Bobby Petrino several years after he should have hired an OC. And Petrino's been all right, but there were better options out there more than likely. DJ Durkin at DC has had his ups and downs. Certainly, they've looked good at times. They've looked not good at other times. They've been hit or miss, certainly, which you cannot be with the defensive talent on that roster. Um, and then, of course, Steve Addazio on the offensive line. I don't think that there's any need to say how bad that unit has been the last 2 years with some great recruits that they have there. Addazio has just failed miserably to coach that offensive line, and Jimbo has shown no interest of ever relieving him there. So just kind of kept that one going and kept showing why he just wasn't fit for that position at this point in time. So with that being the best job in the country, there's going to be top candidates out there. I put a list out in the immediate aftermath of this firing of guys who, if I were in that position, if I were Ross Bjork or on the A&M Board of Regents, which is ultimately who will make this decision over Bjork, the Board of Regents there is going to control this hire. Who I would call first. And Brent Venables is at the top of my list. Brent Venables at Oklahoma, done an incredible job. I think he should be a candidate there. It's going to be tough to pull him away from Oklahoma, but you have to try. If you're A&M, you have that money. You have to give it a chance. There are other guys there that I think should be in consideration. We've heard Dan Lanning has turned the job down already very clearly. I didn't think that was ever going to really happen, but I thought you had to at least give him a call as well. There's a guy, Lane Kiffin. You hear his name in every big job anymore. He should get looked at least. I think Lane Kiffin would do a great job there if he were to get the position. Kalen DeBoer, you hear a little bit at Washington. I don't know that he's going to go down south, especially with Washington joining the Big Ten next year. I think that he's just built for the West Coast, and he's been out there his whole career. So I think you might see that one probably not. But and then Dabo Swinney. I mean, you've heard his name mentioned. You heard his non-denial denial at his press conference there a couple of days ago. Anybody's on the table for A&M, effectively. You're not going to get Nick Saban or Kirby Smart, but outside of those two and maybe 2 or 3 others, you can pretty much land whoever you want there. So you've got to hit this hire. A&M has the talent on roster already to show up next year and be a national title contender. You have the ability to recruit going forward to be a national title contender. You have to hit this hire. You cannot miss on this one. This will change the college football landscape regardless of how it goes, though, because especially if you hit on it. If you get a top-end guy, then you are going to be the force to reckon with, and people are going to have to go out other places to find talent where they've found it before because they're not going to be able to get it out of Texas as much. Moving from that one, though, I think we'll go to Mississippi State now. I certainly have some thoughts on that one as well, and then I'll toss it to Cade on his thoughts on Mississippi State here, but Zach Arnett took over unfortunate situation last year. Obviously, he was promoted to the full-time head coach after we lost Mike Leach in the winter there. He got 1 year, not even the full season, to try and make things happen. My immediate reaction was that I didn't really like the move, but the more and more I hear about it, the more I think about it, I think it kind of had to happen. The talent was there for Mississippi State. They had really, at least they had a veteran presence there, basically the whole team, juniors and seniors, and they were just abysmal on the field. I think that that Arnett tried to do too much with the changing this offseason. I think he tried to overhaul that team to be a different identity than they really had the ability to be. And it just didn't work. It never really showed like it was going to work. I mean, they beat Arizona in a close game in the beginning of the season there, but from then on out, it's kind of just been a spiral for the Bulldogs. So I think that move had to be made. Unfortunately, I think Arnett will still be highly sought after as a coach at a defensive coordinator position. I think just about anybody in the country that needs a DC is going to make a call to him and see if he's willing to make the move to wherever. Um, Mississippi State's a good job though. Still, Mississippi pumps out a lot of top end talent. If you can keep it there, and if you can beat Lane Kiffin for the guys in state, um, then you will have a successful time there in Starkville. It's a you're not going to get a top end the top end talent that you need to win the SEC year in and year out or anything, but you can be a top in a good year, a top five team at Starkville. You can do what Lane Kiffin has done at Ole Miss. You can still do that at Mississippi State. Be a 9-win team, 10-win team, or 9-win team, 8-win team year in, year out, and then pop off a 10-win season every couple of years. That's very possible there. We saw Dan Mullen do it. We saw it looked like Mike Leach was going to be kind of be able to do the same thing there if he had a full career at Mississippi State. So there are the candidate list not quite as expansive as it is for somebody like A&M, but there should be some good names thrown around there. You hear Jamie Chadwell mentioned, the head coach at Liberty currently. Hear John Summerall at Troy mentioned. I think that would be a great hire if they were to make that move. There's a lot of names that I could see going this route, and I think that Mississippi State will look for. But I think we're going to have to wait and see probably what A&M does first before we hear a move from Mississippi State. But ultimately, I think, like I said, I think it was the right decision after some more consideration. I'll toss over to Cade now. What are your thoughts on this move here after we've had a couple of days to think on it?
I kind of agree with you here. I mean, it's a very interesting move just because it was a really tough situation for Arnett to walk into. Nobody really plans for what happened there with Mississippi State and how things went down, especially with Mike Leach. It was a tough situation to go into, and I think you hinted on the best point about this is that he tried to overhaul that team a little too much, a little too quickly. Mississippi State went from a team that was an air raid offense to now they're really, I don't even want to say they're a balanced offense. They're a run-heavy team. And when you're under a guy like Mike Leach, he builds his teams a certain way you're going to be an air raid team. You're going to be a team that's going to throw the football consistently and throw it well. And this year, Will Rogers has arguably had probably his worst season at Mississippi State. And he's a mainstay there while Leach was there, especially over the last couple of years. He's been a very good quarterback. Seems like he's in his 900th year of college football this year, but now that he's hurt, it makes it even harder. But it just seemed like it was not going to be the best of situations this year for Mississippi State. And, maybe they realized that they might have pulled the trigger a little bit too early on Arnett in the sense of hiring him because – they just did what they kind of had to do with that hire. I mean, you probably in that situation for what happened and when it happened and how it happened, you kind of just needed to stay within. But to go defense, maybe not the best thing to do, but it didn't seem like it was a good fit. I think we can both agree on that it just didn't seem like it was a good fit, and that's why things part ways. And obviously they can restart again. Summerall, like you said, that name's been tossed around a lot of being a guy who can get one of these Power 5 jobs. Obviously not like the high-end Power 5 jobs, but let's say like Elko leaves Duke or, this Mississippi State job or maybe the UCLA job to an extent. When you look at Summerall, though, man, if I were a Power 5 program like that, that kind of needs to fill a hole, I'd be salivating at the lips right now to try to go get Summerall. He's done a great job in his really short time with Troy, but he's done a good job with the culture of that program. I think his name's going to get tossed around a lot, obviously, here over the next couple of weeks. But anything can happen. College football, the word that I've been seeing a lot recently is fluidity. It's a very fluid overall landscape. And that's kind of what it's looking like right now with Chip Kelly. Obviously, as I said, the talk right now is that Kelly is going to be fired. But if he goes out this weekend and he wins this game, anything could happen. The same thing, obviously, Blake, happens with LSU in the past. You're very familiar with that.
Absolutely.
But the big thing with Kelly is him and his adaptability to the modern set of college football. Obviously, the big thing is that the big questions around him is that he doesn't really mesh well with the boosters. They aren't really willing to give the money. The NIL situation doesn't seem to be where it needs to be as a program located in Los Angeles. Those are the big questions right now around UCLA. But the biggest question that I've got is, what does this mean for Dante Moore? Obviously, Dante this year, he had a lot of hype around him. He's a very young kid. He started as a freshman this year for UCLA. And it hasn't been the best season for him. He's turned the ball over a lot, but you can definitely see the raw talent there. I think you and I talked about this pretty well the other night, Blake, after we heard the news of Chip Kelly, was that we both thought that Dante, regardless of what was going to happen, was going to be gone this year, but this kind of makes that even more of a possibility this year, that Dante is going to hit the portal. So that's really what I see the biggest thing coming out of this UCLA situation, but I'll let you give a little bit more thoughts about this one, and then we'll get into our preview for the week.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just such a weird timing of a move and the way of course it comes out of Bruins Report. So they just they got the information and they broke it. I think probably a lot earlier than UCLA would have liked. Obviously, as you mentioned, Kate, yeah, fluidity is a big thing here. I've seen this happen before where it gets broken before you'd like that you're gonna let the guy go and you're gonna leave him of his coaching duties, and then he goes out, wins a game. The players, celebrate with him in the locker room, off the field, chant his name, and all of a sudden, well, he's the head coach now, because you've missed on your first hire. So then you just go out and say, well, Rice, he's gonna stick around. Of course, that's what happened with Coach O back in 2016, the upset of A&M, and then the players carry him off the field, chanting to keep Coach O. LSU misses on Tom Herman, who was their first option, and then one thing leads to another, and the next day there was a press conference for Coach O being promoted to the full-time head coach. Not the same situation. Obviously, this is a firing of a coach instead of a not promoting to a full-time, but still, it can happen just like that. The one thing that I think could prove fatal for this, though, for Chip Kelly, is that the word is that he had kind of lost a little bit of the locker room as well. That's kind of in the Bruins Report piece as well, saying that there was going to be a pretty large exodus of players in this offseason. Dante Moore, of course, being kind of the one that everyone circles here. Of course, Ethan Garbers as well, I think would be fairly highly sought after in the portal. The alternate or the other QB there, can't say one's really been a starter this year. They both had starting time at different points. I think he'll be sought after if he hits the portal as well there. But there was going to be a large exodus, it sounds like. Of course, Kate, as you mentioned, the boosters being a big thing, where Chip Kelly just doesn't really mesh with that. He doesn't want to rub elbows with boosters. He wants to go out. He wants to coach football, and wants to, be done with it after that. Wants to just focus on the game. That's why he left Oregon in 2012 to go to the NFL, because he didn't want to. He didn't want to recruit. He didn't want to hang out with the boosters that you had to back then. And of course, it's doubled down in the last 10 years now of what you had to do in 2012 versus what you have to do today to be competitive in this sport. And especially with UCLA heading to the Big Ten, it's going to be a different animal now. You have to recruit better because the Big Ten is not the Pac-12. It's just not. Of course, this year you can say maybe the Pac-12 has been a little better in their swan song of a season, but far and wide, the Big Ten is the better conference here, and has a lot more to contend with Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. If Michigan State ever figures it out there, they can be a threat. Plenty others, Nebraska, you can mention, Wisconsin. The list goes on. And of course you're bringing three other Pac-12 programs with you that are all very competitive and all have high level coaches right now to contend with too. So you've got that to fight against as well. So if you're not willing to recruit, the move has to be made. So you know I was surprised by it at first, but after reading the article from Bruins Report, it makes a lot of sense. If that's all the case and if that's all true, then you have to make a move there realistically. This job, I think, I don't know how to feel about it. I think that probably the consensus is going to be that it's a kind of a third level job, which I think is a little bit underrated for it. I think it's more of a second level job. I don't see any reason why it can't be on the same level as USC realistically. Honestly, I don't know that it's not a better job at its peak than USC realistically. I mean, you're playing the Rose Bowl for all your home games. It's not a great home atmosphere, but it's not like USC has that either. You're just not going to have that in LA because you can't put, college football stadiums on campuses there. It's just you don't have the space for it. Same issue that you have in Coral Gables right now, and why Miami has an issue with home atmosphere. But so you have that issue, yeah, with lacking the home atmosphere. But you can recruit high levels. You should be able to run California at least. Get the same amount of high level kids that USC does. You split the top end talent there. At it should be your worst case scenario realistically, which Chip Kelly just was not doing by any means. Of course, a lot of talent's been leaking out of the state for a long time there, and it still kind of is. So they need to find a way to lock that down and not let the California talent leave. So that's going to be something that whoever they bring in has to work on doing. Not just out recruiting USC, but out recruiting Ohio State, Alabama, and Texas, who have been poaching California and LSU to an extent, who have been poaching California talent for a long time. So it's going to be, there's going to be names here that I think might surprise people that are going to be mentioned. Not, again, not the names that you're going to see at A&M. You're not going to hear Davos Swinney talked about in this or Brent Venables or guys like that. But some guys that are, maybe a tier 3 job right now. Example, I guess, I maybe like a Jed Fish, I think could be mentioned. Arizona, maybe a tier 3 job there. Uh, Jed Fish, I think, could be mentioned in this one. He's done a good job with the Wildcats. They're headed to Big 12 play, obviously, next year with UCLA headed to the Big 10, so they're going different routes. But, guys like that, tier 3 jobs, guys that might want to look up to that tier 2 range that UCLA is all really an option here. I think if you're UCLA, you have to try and go splash a big fish hire, get the top guy you can. Because if you fall behind early here when you hit the Big Ten, it's going to be pretty hard for them to recover, I think. I think that you have to hit the ground running the best you can. You're already going to probably see a decent exodus. I don't think that the coaching change is going to change that. Realistically, I think what you were going to lose already, you're just going to have to deal with. You're just going to have to replace them. You're going to have to hit the portal hard. You have to get a guy that can hit the portal well. That's the other thing you have to find here is a guy that can not just recruit out of high school, but can recruit the portal well. Because I think that's going to be a big thing for UCLA and the Big Ten era. Because you got to find guys that are going to be willing to travel. You're going to have to go to Big Ten country for, all of your away games. So you're going to be going 4 or 5 times a year to Mid-America, to the East Coast even, which is quite the travel, which, of course, the plight of modern college football at the moment is going to be the traveling for these schools. But it's a good job, I think. I think it's an underrated job, but it's going to be a job that's going to be tough. It's going to take a real competitor, somebody who's got that competitive mindset to take this one over. So they've just got to find a way to make the right move here, I think. Outside of that, though, yeah, we'll see. I can't imagine things changing here after reading the report, but you never know with college football. So there's always potential for that. Of course, Andy Avalos as well has been fired at Boise State. By the way, I just want to mention that one really quickly. That one, Boise State, one of the top G5 jobs over a long period of time. That could be a job that, a lot of guys kind of vie for as well. So I just want to throw that one out there with that change being made too.
Yeah, there's a lot happening right now in college football, obviously off the field. Now we're going to turn it on the field. Before we get into our preview this week, obviously, actually, I guess we can do this side to side. We're going to talk about the first game on our docket. We've got 6 again this week. Pretty simple schedule. We talked that we were going to be pretty robust once rivalry week comes around, and I think we finally got a preview for all of you listeners out there of what our rivalry week really schedule is going to be like. Well, early in the week, obviously, we're going to have our recap. We're going to recap this week 12 matchups, and then we're going to have, I believe, Thursday, or actually, no, it would be Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday evening, we are going to release a show that will be previewing the midweek games, the weekday games that'll be happening during rivalry week, and then obviously probably our standard either Friday or Thursday later in the week, we're going to drop our episode going into the Saturday games. Obviously, there's a lot of big games that are going on with a lot of importance over the next 2 weeks. When you look at conference championships, when you look at college football playoff hopes, there's a lot of games that are happening. So speaking of college football playoff, we got a new number 1 in the college football playoff. The Georgia Bulldogs have hopped the Ohio State Buckeyes. They switch. Georgia goes to 1. Ohio State moves down to 2. Georgia, a very stamping win, I will say, over Ole Miss at home last week. This week, they got to travel to Tennessee. This game doesn't have the importance that it did, or at least looked like it might have, heading into the last 2 weeks and last week as well. Georgia has locked up the SEC East. They will be taking on Alabama. Tennessee, with the loss against Missouri last week, eliminates them from conference championship contention, but they still can play for pride here. This is a tough game for Georgia on the road, Neyland. Tennessee in this situation. Blake, what are your thoughts on this game?
Oh boy, this one. These two teams going very separate, going very opposite directions right now. After last week, Georgia just running Ole Miss out of the stadium. Didn't see that one coming as bad as it was. I thought Georgia was looking good, but I did not think they were going to do that to Ole Miss. But boy, did they! That game was just a dominating effort by Georgia there. And Tennessee, like you said, just kind of got body bagged by Mizzou and of course by Cody Schrader. So, very different last week for these teams. Of course, this one being in Neyland, you would hope helps out Tennessee a little bit. But with how different these teams, I think, with the trajectory of these seasons, I think it's going to be a rough day for Tennessee. Couple of weeks ago, I said that I thought Georgia would drop sometime in the regular season. I don't think that's really on the table at this point, the way they've kind of turned the corner. It would take a come-apart game from Carson Beck probably to make that happen, and realistically, the way Georgia runs that offense, it's just going to be so hard for him to have that. They're too careful with the football. They don't let Carson Beck put it in harm's way, really. They don't have to. I think even if they kind of opened up a little more, I don't know that he's going to make those mistakes. And I think they trust him to make those throws, those bigger throws if they need it to happen, but they just don't need to. So they haven't really let him put the ball in harm's way yet. And I don't see that really changing this weekend. Tennessee's defense, pass defense has been a big issue for them all year long. They've struggled to stop the pass. They can get after the quarterback well, which is kind of their one big thing right now. They can really make a quarterback's life hard, but the quarterback will still dice them up downfield because their secondary has been, somewhat of a travesty this year, especially in the second half of the season. So I think Beck's once again probably in for a pretty nice little game there. The debate is on whether you even need to use him, because you saw what Cody Schrader could do against this Tennessee defense. You had success running the ball last week. If you're Georgia, can you do it again this week? Of course, I think that was even more just Cody Schrader taking that game over against Tennessee, and just him carrying defenders, 3 at a time, which was incredible to see. I'm not sure Georgia's going to be able to do that. I'm not sure they're going to run to the level that Mizzou was able to, because I think it was more on the back than on what's up front there, which is where Georgia's going to particularly thrive, is with just moving bodies around up front in the run game. But I think they're still going to have plenty of success. I don't think it's going to be anywhere near needing to really throw the ball around to a high extent, or to a dangerous extent. So I think Beck's going to be in for another game where he just kind of picks the team apart slowly but surely. Puts a lot of yards up. You got Brock Bowers back now. Obviously, you didn't need him last week particularly. Um, it's what was said a couple of weeks ago. I think it was Parker Fleming that put it out on Twitter that said, this might be dangerous. This is probably dangerous now because you're letting Georgia figure out how to run their offense without Brock Bowers, and then they're going to bring him back in a couple of weeks, and that's exactly what happened. Georgia figured out how to run an offense without Brock Bowers, and then you just put him back into play. So they look unstoppable right now, at least for what they have left on their regular season schedule. We'll see about what happens in the SEC title game there with Bama. But this is a bad matchup for Tennessee. This is a bad, look for Tennessee after last week. Call it wounded animal mode. I don't think they've got it in them. I just think this team is kind of slipping at the end of the season. I think they've run out of gas. I think it's going to be a long day for Tennessee here, even at home. So I've got Georgia 41-14, kind of just taking the body bag back to Tennessee here.
So you're going with the big win in this one. And before I get into mine, Tyler agrees with you on this one about Georgia with a pretty decent sized victory. Tyler has this one 33-13, Georgia defeating Tennessee. But I'll get into my thoughts here for this game. I think that you bring up a lot of good thoughts. I think that Tennessee just kind of has run out of gas. But another thing that I like you said, these two teams are going in very opposite directions right now. Georgia is surging. They're having their late season surge. They've done this the past 2-3 seasons. They've had time to do this. This team, when you look at it, this team was not the past 2 seasons team. Those two teams had, teams that look like they could be some of the better teams in the history of college football, period. Both of those teams, they're on a 20-plus game win streak right now for a reason because they're a great program. This year's team, they've been they're good. Don't get me wrong. I have them as my number 1 team in the country for a reason. They looked really, really good last week. But I kind of think when I looked at those final 3 games of the season, obviously in the preseason, we didn't think that those 3 would be maybe one of those 3 or maybe 2 of those 3 might be, in a situation where somebody could spark something, somebody might be pretty highly ranked, and all 3 of them have been ranked for Georgia. Obviously, Tennessee now the lowest of the 3 that they're going to have to face. But I think Missouri was just the team that had the best recipe to do something against Georgia. If you would have asked me this a month ago when Tennessee took on Bama, I would have said Tennessee would have had a very good recipe, but like you said, it just seems like they're tailing off at the latter stage of the season because they've run out of that firepower. Obviously, in the second place game for the SEC East is what it was last week. Missouri ran all over them, and Tennessee was really in that ball game. Tennessee just did not have the football that entire ball game. That's the big thing is that they would just, Missouri would grind out drives with Cody Schrader and they'd punch it in or they'd kick a field goal. And then Tennessee would get the ball, either score in 2 minutes or punt in 2 minutes. What else do you want to expect in that ball game for only putting up a 7 spot? There's not much else that you can really do when you don't have the football. That's just how it's going to go because you're going to press offensively. And that's the only way that I could see maybe Tennessee turning things around and keeping this game a bit more competitive is that they might be able to hold the football a little bit longer. But I still think Georgia's going to take care of business. I think it's just that time where them and Alabama are on a crash course right now, and you and I, and Tyler included, very, very excited for that football game. We all have our own separate thoughts about that game currently. I'm not sure if they would change in the conference championship scheme of things, but I just think Georgia's going to keep rolling. I think they've got Atlanta on their mind, and then beyond that, obviously, is on their mind. And they've been slided at every turn this year, and they've been able to bear down and get victories when they need to get victories, and I think it's going to continue this week. I get this one 34-17. Georgia takes the victory pretty comfortably. I think the scoreboard shows that this game is closer than what it actually is. I just think Georgia gets out to an early lead. Obviously, the road environment might do something, but I don't think it'll do enough. I got Georgia pretty big in this one. I think we all do. But to another game this weekend that has of great interest and of great importance, Washington, undefeated. They've had basically a one-score game every single game since Oregon. Actually, even before that, you could say Arizona. Since they played Arizona, Washington has been in a one-score game each and every week, and it looks like it's going to continue again this week. They travel to Corvallis, take on Oregon State. Oregon State currently sits in third place, I believe tied with Arizona right now in the Pac-12 standings. Oregon State still technically can control their own destiny if things go their way, but this is a big game this weekend. This is a really interesting matchup this weekend. How are you thinking about this game?
Yeah, talk about the run Oregon State's got to make here. They get to finish the season here. Of course, they had Colorado not last week, a couple of weeks ago, but last week they had Stanford actually, and they just absolutely body bagged Stanford in a just ugly game. But you finished the season with Washington and Oregon. What a fun way for the Beavers to have this season roll out here into. But you've got a chance to give both of these teams who blew your conference up and who left you standing at the altar with nobody here other than Washington State to dance with. You've got a chance to give both of them a parting gift of knocking them. Probably it would. I mean, it would knock Oregon if they were able to win both of these games. It would knock Oregon out of the Pac-12 title game, and it would put Oregon State in, obviously. But it might just happen to knock both of them out of the playoff picture too. So really big chance for Oregon State here with these last two games. But to focus on the one this weekend against Washington, I picked against Washington last week. I think that the way that college football rolls, you see quite often the old mantra is for the pretender and the contender that October is a month for pretenders to thrive, and then November is when the contenders come to play. Um, I have been on the belief that Washington State, I hate to call them a pretender, they're a great football team. They are. Um, but Washington, I think, is running out of gas. They keep playing these really close games. There's no gear for them to shift up into at this point, I don't think. They are what they are. Their offense is still great. Their defense is lackluster. They're going to be in close games every single week, kind of what Texas has been doing. But Washington doesn't have quite the same level of talent up front that Texas has that's kind of kept them alive in those close games. Washington just can't pull away. They're not going to be able to pull away from anybody. And if you can't pull away, you're going to slip at some point. And I think Oregon State just provides such a good opportunity for that to happen. Oregon State can run the football with the best of them. They've been a great running team all year long. That's their identity. That's what they like to do. But DJ Uiagalelei, who I had really high hopes for coming into the season, started the season a little shaky. He looked good, but not, he didn't look like he had taken the step up that I wanted him to. Well, he has. He's taken the step up. He looks like a really, really good quarterback right now. He does not make a lot of mistakes. He throws the ball well. He's made great reads, great throws week in, week out. And since about halfway through the season, it's when that light switch kind of flipped on for him. He's looked incredible. Washington coming off of a really physical game against Utah. They played that one close. Of course, they took the lead midway through the third quarter, I think it was, and then never let it up. Of course, that one ended in some weird ways there as well with the fumble and at the goal line, everything that happened there. But they kept that game. But Utah kept that game close, and of course, they had the lead going at the half there. It's just, I don't think Washington's going to have enough gas in the tank to ride this season out to the Pac-12 title game undefeated. I really don't. I think they've got to be running low at this point, and I think Oregon State's going to be the spot where they slip. I've liked this Beaver team all year long. I think they're playing for something a little extra here with the whole parting gift mentality. Make your upset now and send them off, to the Pac-12 title game with one loss now at least. I think that's going to be the goal here for the Beavers. I think they're going to do it. I really do. I like what Jonathan Smith's got going there. I don't like what I've seen out of Washington. Like I said, there's no gear they can shift up into. They are what they are. And I think Oregon State has been, the better team compared to Washington over the last 3 or 4 weeks. So I'm taking Oregon State here at home. Of course, Corvallis is going to be rocking for this game. It'll be a good environment. I'm sure it'll be fun to see. Fun to watch. It's going to be Sounds like there's gonna be some ugly weather there. Sounds like we might get some rain, might get some pretty heavy winds again, which is what we saw in Seattle last week for that Utah game. And I think, Oregon State being kind of that upgraded version of Utah is just going to be, another help or another factor in their favor. A little more, not more physical, certainly, but honestly, on the offensive line, a little more physical, to be fair. But, better outside, a little more talented outside than US or than Utah is, and a little more prone to take advantage of Washington's issues. So I'm taking Oregon State here. I think it's going to be a good game throughout, but I think at some point there's just going to be a spot where they kind of start leaning on Washington towards the end, and that the Huskies can't stand against it. So I'm taking Oregon State 33-24 to pull the upset finally.
So you're going with the upset. You're going with Washington's first loss of the season. I will say Tyler agrees with you. Tyler has this one 35-31 for the Beavers. I know he's been high on Oregon State this year. I think all three of us have really been high on Oregon State this year. Obviously, they had, the two games that they ended up dropping this year were not exactly in the best positions. They had to travel on the road to Arizona in a late game. I picked that game correctly, which is where the Pac-12 just kind of becomes a cannibal conference. That's the best way that I can describe it as, is a cannibal conference. And obviously the loss to Washington State early in the season, where they just kind of got boat raced in that game. And that's the last win that Washington State has had this year. So Oregon State, though, is in a very good position right now. They looked really good last week against Stanford. They've looked really good against some good teams this year. When UCLA was at their peaks, they looked good against them. Utah, they beat Utah at home and really dominated that football game. Oregon State has been a very, very good football team this year. I wholeheartedly believe that. I've been on this too. I've been on the Oregon State train. Obviously, I picked against them a couple times this year. Actually, I think the only game where I picked against them that I was, or picked for them that I was wrong was the Washington State game. I think Tyler and I both picked Oregon State that weekend, and Washington State just came out with the offense, and that's when they were in their, that was the last win of the season. So it's a very interesting position right now for Washington. I think Tyler and I also kind of talked about this when we recapped our Week 11, is that there doesn't seem to be another gear, like you said, for Washington. It just seems like this is what this team is going to be. It's a team with a high-powered offense and has gaping holes on defense that can be attacked. And the biggest way to beat this team is to either make Penix turn the ball over or just shut down that offense. Because if you can score on Washington, which very many teams have been able to prove this year that they can score on Washington, it's easy to get out ahead of them. Utah proved it last week, and then Washington made great adjustments at halftime, and they came out and they rolled in the second half. I mean, there were only 11 total points scored in the second half, and they were all in the third quarter from Washington. There's not much else to do, but I think that right now, Oregon State is in a better position than Utah is. Utah is still, obviously, they're a team that's kind of, like we said, they're a team that isn't going to change its identity. It is what it is. Oregon State, I think, still is, I don't know if there's another gear, but there might be another 5, 6, 7 miles an hour that this team can go. And we saw a little bit of that pressing on the gas last weekend whenever we saw them play Stanford. There is potential for this team, and this team is a wrecking ball right now. And the wrecking ball can once again create cannibalism in the Pac-12 and mess up their playoff hopes. That reside in Washington and Oregon right now, who are 5th and 6th in the country. Washington, Tyler and I have been on this. You've been on this. We think that Oregon is the best team in the Pac-12, and we think Washington is a 2. And there's a difference there. And it's, like you said, it's because of that identity of what Washington is. They've got the NFL talent out at wide receiver. They've got the NFL talent at quarterback. Penix has had arguably the best passing season this year when you look at statistics and numbers of quarterbacks. He's been lights out because he's got that talent on the outside. He's got Odunze. He's got Polk. He's got these guys that he can throw the ball to that are going to be successful players likely in the NFL. But, Oregon State's got an offense too. DJ Uiagalelei. I mean, this guy. Another thing about Clemson, man, when you shun players with talent like this, and then they finally get into a system that works with their skills better and actually develops them to be better football players, it works out. DJ has had a fantastic second half of this year. He's been a great quarterback for Oregon State, and like I said, they've been a running football team. Washington has done okay against the run. The main thing is that they struggled against the pass. But Utah, a team that has absolutely struggled to throw the football this year, was able to throw it on Washington. What's DJ going to be able to do? If Bryson Barnes can do it, I'm sure DJ can do it. And for that reason, a lot of the signs are pointing to Oregon State this weekend. They're even favored right now, and I just think that it's a perfect spot for the Beavers in this situation. Like you said, send out Washington with a present. Here's your parting gift. Have a good time. We'll take this victory over you, and I think Oregon State and the Beavers are going to do that this weekend. I got it 31-27. Give me the Beavers in this one. Going to be a close one, but another close game that has a lot of eyes that's in the nightcap of this week. A certain team is traveling to Ames in November, wearing orange nonetheless. We kind of seen the story in the past a little bit play out in 2011 with Oklahoma State, but this time it's Texas. Texas right now practically controls their own destiny when it looks at college football playoff hopes. If they win out the way that they have with the wins that they have, they would likely lock up a college football playoff spot. Now, there is obviously the debate of what would happen, if certain teams go undefeated, but Texas is in a very good position right now. They travel to Ames this weekend. They take on Iowa State. Ames a tough place to play. Iowa State, a team that, not exactly the best offensively, but very, very solid defensively. Blake, what are your thoughts on this game?
Well, so I have to say I'm a big fan of what Matt Campbell's done at Iowa State over the last. This is a program that has been, a doormat for as long as I can ever think of. I mean, historically they've been just horrific, and he has brought life to this place, and he's done it in a great way. Matt Campbell's a guy you just like to see succeed. It's been a fun thing to watch him, and I always enjoy, seeing Matt Campbell, do great things there whenever they have the opportunity. And they have the opportunity this weekend. So Texas, like I said a minute ago, really can't get out of their own way and can't stop playing close football games. And unlike Washington, though, it's not because they can't pull away. They can. Texas can pull away easily. Their problem is that they keep letting teams back into the game. In the last 2 weeks, we've seen Texas pull out to a pretty sizable advantage. You especially think, against Kansas State 2 weeks ago that everybody probably saw, but then last week against TCU that nobody probably saw. Texas, big advantage in both of those games, and they just bungled it away the whole way through. They just could not convert when it mattered, kept making defensive errors, and ultimately both teams had an opportunity to go and win the football game at one point or another. And you can't keep doing that if you're Texas. You have the ability to be one of the best teams in the country and really to be a national title contender. I think that, you look at Michigan right now, Georgia right now kind of pulling away a little bit, and Michigan, of course, has looked great all season. But I think Texas and Oregon are kind of right there at that second level of, all it takes is one little slip from either of those two teams when you play, and you can pull off the upset, and you can make your way to a national title this year because this season has been so unpredictable. They're going to have a shot at this, but they can't. They have a shot at the playoff and at a title, but they can't get in their own way again because I think that especially going on the road here to Ames at night. You can't make the slips that you have the last 2 weeks because Iowa State's going to capitalize on them and the home environment, especially. Rocco Becht has been, up and down a little bit this year. He looked pretty rough at the start of the season. I think, we talked about Iowa State a couple of weeks ago when they played Kansas. I think it's the game we talked about. And I said, this is a team that was hit pretty hard early in the season, by the gambling issues. They were supposed to be a veteran team this year. With returning starters at quarterback and running back and several other spots, but they lost that starting quarterback and running back that they had the experience with Hunter Deckers, and So, they've had to replace a lot of the pieces they thought they were going to have back this year. And they've, after a couple of weeks of, shaky football, of course, like losing to OU in Athens, Ohio, on a weekend there, they figured it out and they started rolling. They're a bowl eligible team. They would be a one-loss conference team if they hadn't dropped that game to Kansas. Even still, they're a two-loss conference team that can still make their way into the Big 12 title game and somehow. Who thought we'd be saying that about Iowa State with 2 games left in the season? They're still in the hunt for a Big 12 title appearance. It's a good football team. It's not a great football team. It's not Texas. They're like Texas is a great football team. Iowa State's not. They're just good. But the way Texas has been letting people stay in the game, good's enough to beat Texas right now. Quinn Ewers was back last week too, so we can't blame it on the quarterback position. Not that Blake Murphy was the issue against Kansas State a couple of weeks ago. He had his moments of error, but it wasn't completely his fault that they let the Wildcats back into that one. Texas just can't afford to make these mistakes. They have to convert when it matters. They're without Brooks now for the rest of the season. He tore his ACL last week against TCU. So, your bell cow running back is down. You've got talent behind him there, certainly, that have had, appearances this year and that have taken the snaps, but, you don't have your main back anymore. What is that going to do to this team? Because you think about how you put a game away, you want to keep it on the ground, and you lose your top end back there. So does it make it a bigger issue for Texas to put games away? It certainly could be. But you also have to ask, can Texas pull that gap that they've pulled on these other teams? And I don't know that Iowa State will let them pull that gap in the first place. So if Iowa State can keep this game close early, then, if Texas still has their second half miscues, you could be looking at Texas down, 2 scores halfway through the third quarter. And it's, well, what happened? How did we get here? And Iowa State can lean on you a little bit. They're not the best running team of all time, but they can lean on you some. But mainly they want to do this through the air, especially with how Texas' secondary has played recently. They've been banged up at times, and they just really haven't ever put it all together back there. They have the talent to. They just haven't clicked yet. And I think this late in the season, it's hard to see that unit click from here on. So if Rocco Beck can throw this ball around well enough to keep Iowa State close early, and then in the second half, if the trends keep going, pulling a lead out there, I like I like where they would stand, and that's kind of how I think this game's going to go. I don't think Iowa State's going to fall into some massive gap early like TCU did and like Kansas State did. They're a little more put together. They kind of match up better with Texas than Kansas State did, and TCU was just outmatched in that game in general. And it took those mistakes to let them back into it. But Iowa State's a little better team there, and they can do more against Texas than Kansas State did. So I think they're going to keep this game close early. And I think when we hit that second half, I think Texas is still going to find a way to make some mistakes, not improve what they need to improve. And what we've seen is to kind of be that classic Texas game over, the whole Steve Sarkisian era. You fall apart in the second half and you lose the games. They've snuck by so far this year, but I think it's going to revert to the loss this weekend. I've got Iowa State pulling the upset here in this one. There's something about it, chaos in college football. It's a beautiful thing. I don't think necessarily that Texas is a pretender, but I think they could easily be a contender. But, sometimes even contenders slip up or run out of gas. And I think it's going to happen to Texas this weekend. I'm going to take Iowa State to pull it 41-37 in the upset in Ames. And Matt Campbell, makes another statement here.
So you're going with a big high-scoring game in this one, interesting enough. I don't think me or Tyler have it either this way. I'll go with Tyler scoring this one. Tyler has it Texas in this game, 27-17. That's his score for this game. But when I looked at Texas's schedule after the Kansas State win, I sat there and I saw the 3 remaining games in the regular season, and I said, all right, which one of these games looks like the scariest? And I circled this one. This game is terrifying from the perspective of Texas. I think this is a really bad spot for Texas, too. They haven't been playing very well when it comes to in the second half when it matters the most. In the fourth quarter, they have not been playing very well the past couple of weeks. Like we said, they let Kansas State back in the ball game with a couple turnovers from Malik Murphy. They let TCU back in the ball game very quickly last week after dominating that football game. It's like you can't keep doing this if you're Texas because you're playing with fire. And the fire that you really don't want to mess with is Iowa State in this situation. Ames is not a fun place to play, especially at night. It is not the best place to play as an opposing team with all the hopes in the world, all the pressure on your shoulders. This is not the spot you want to be in, yet Texas has been able to grind out those victories the past couple of weeks because the talent's there. Obviously, losing Brooks, that's huge. That is huge for this team because he really hit his own this year. He's been their bell cow back. He has been a stud this year on the ground for Texas overall, and losing a guy like that, that's tough. But they still got the talent that they got in the receiving corps. I mean, they still got A.D. Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, Sanders. Like, these guys are all, that I don't even want to say it's some of the best players at their positions in the conference, in the country, period. I mean, these guys are probably all top 15 minimum at their positions in the country. I think that Texas has, one of the best receiving corps in the country. Ewers, obviously, he didn't look the best last weekend. I don't think he's looked the best this year. I know I'm probably the lowest on Ewers out of the three of us this year. I just think that Quinn, well, it's been rumored that Quinn will be returning next year, actually, which is another big thing, is that Quinn won't be entering his name into the draft, so he would return for his. Obviously, he reclassified at Ohio State, so next year would actually probably, by standards, be his true. It would be his true senior season when you look at it by the standards of the NCAA, but it would actually be his junior season. So, I mean, he's still a younger guy. He's still got room to improve, and I think it's a tough position for him because Texas, I mean, obviously they're no scares to road environments. They went to Bama, they took on the Tide at Bryant-Denny and beat them, and beat them pretty convincingly at that too. And that's keeping Texas alive big right now as that win over Alabama because they have arguably the best win in the country right now. I think it is the best win in the country right now is what Texas has. Because you went into the house of Alabama, who I think is playing like, a top 2 team in the country right now, and you beat them. Obviously, it was early this season. Obviously, Bama didn't have everything figured out, but you still have that head-to-head. That's the best win in the country. That's going to keep you alive in certain positions. You can't slip up now if you're Texas, because if you do, it's out the door, and you're staring down the bullet of a Cotton Bowl or a Peach Bowl, something like that, and that's where you got to seize the moment here if you're Texas, and I think that something is different this year for Texas, and I think something is going to keep this team, I don't want to say rolling, but winning, because that's all that matters right now is winning. And I think we're going to see that this weekend. I think that this is going to be a brawl. It's going to be a messy game, but I don't think Iowa State. I've seen this team in person. I'm the only one of the three of us that's seen this team in person. Granted, it was at the beginning of the year, but this offense is just. I don't think it has enough because the only way I see Iowa State winning this game is if they keep it close and they keep it low and they win by a turnover or a field goal, something like that happening. And that's even how I see this game playing out, but I think Texas just has enough. I do. I think that the Longhorns have just enough, even though that everything is pointing in the direction of Iowa State in this game. I think Texas scrapes by the skin of their teeth in this one yet again this week. I got it 23-21. Tough game for the Longhorns, but it's a game that they need. They go into Ames. They take the victory. Very close game. But another game of importance when you look at conference this week, Clemson and North Carolina. North Carolina travels to Clemson, to Memorial Stadium to take on the Tigers. Clemson, since that NC State game, they've been playing pretty well. Obviously, they lost that game. They lost the Miami game. It looked like all hope was going to be lost, and they've played pretty well since. They beat Notre Dame. They won convincingly last week against Georgia Tech in the Clemson, obviously the plus spot that Tyler and I like to refer to. When Clemson's playing at noon on ABC, yeah, the Tigers are going to be rolling because that's just their comfort spot, especially if Sean McDonough's on the call. That's the trifecta right there for Clemson. But this week, North Carolina's still playing for their ACC title hopes. It's not in their hands. They don't control their own destiny, but this game has big importance. The Tar Heels are going to have to win this game to stay alive. Do we think they can do it this weekend?
You know, this is just such a weird spot. UNC played a really odd football game last week against Duke. It ended up in a shootout when it was what I think in the teens midway through the fourth quarter. Then all of a sudden it's a 40-point game for both teams in overtime. Odd showing there. The offense still flashing, the defense still kind of having its moments of struggle. Clemson, on the other hand, here has really found something. I feel like Tyler from Spartanburg called into Dabo Swinney's show, and all of a sudden now he's fired himself up. The whole team has found a way to fire themselves up, and they just look better. They're utilizing some of that athleticism more than they have been all season long. That's kind of been the biggest issue with Clemson the last few years is that they haven't had the athletes of the past, especially outside and in the backfield, but mainly outside. I think the receiver room has been the biggest issue. And you see some true freshmen, some big time true freshmen step up and show some talent. Um, they still aren't what they used to be out wide by any means, but they've looked better. They've looked like they've found an identity and found a presence as a team, which is a plus for them going into this game, especially having this game at home. Maybe fire them up a little bit here. UNC, like I said, weird game last week. Put a lot or had to kind of empty the tank in that one against Duke to stay alive and to keep going. Um, Realistically, here though, it's going to be about can UNC's offense can they score enough points here because Clemson's found a way to score, and they're going to have enough against this. They're going to be able to take plenty against the UNC defense. That's what's going to happen. The UNC defense is kind of starting to. That unit ran out of gas. That was a unit that kind of impressed at the start of the season. They've ran out of gas a little bit, and they've started to slip a little bit here and there. Um, Clemson will have success against them. I have no doubt about that. They will run the football to a good enough extent. That's been the one thing that UNC's been able to kind of handle is the run game, but Clemson will still be able to do it. I think their offensive line has looked solid recently, and they've allowed them to run the football better. But Klubnik, good quarterback there. I've always been high on Klubnik. At the beginning of the year, people were calling for his head, like they called for DJ's last year. Never understood why they did it for DJ. Never understood why they would do it for Cade Klubnik. I think they're both good quarterbacks. Klubnik has looked really good, especially in the second half of the year, though. He's taken another step up, and that offense is clicking with him at the helm. So they're going to have plenty of success on the offensive side of the football. Can UNC's offense match it, though, against what is, not a stellar Clemson defense by any means, a unit that I've had a lot of concerns about all year long. It was my biggest concern with them going into the year, actually, even more than the offense was. I was really worried about this defensive unit, and those concerns were backed up a little bit at times. But even they, have found a little bit of an identity. They found that senior leadership. They're a very veteran-led unit, especially up front on the defensive line. It was just guys that didn't have the playing experience, but they were all, I think they're all redshirt juniors or seniors on that team. They've all been there for 4 or 5 years. They finally meshed a little bit, and they've at least put up a good fight. Outside, they've got talent though in the cornerbacks room and in the secondary. They've looked really good, solid there. That's been their strength defensively this season. I think they match up well against the UNC offense for that reason. And really, I just think it's another game where Clemson's trajectory is trending upwards a little bit here. Which is not something I thought I would say in the month of November. I thought it would be going the other way. I thought they would be going downhill. But at this point, I think they are getting better, and I think that UNC not getting necessarily way worse. They are sliding a little bit. They just have run out of a little bit of gas. They're sputtering, I think, would be the better word for it. And for that reason, especially this game being at Clemson, it's going to be a loud environment. It's going to be a tough environment. Potentially one of Drake May's final games in a Tar Heel uniform, maybe probably the second to last at this rate. So he'll put up a good fight, I think, and I think UNC is going to put up a good fight, but I just don't think it's going to be enough. I think Clemson's going to find a way to win this game here at home, 28-21. I'm taking the Tigers, and I think it's going to be a fun showing, I think.
So you're thinking this one's going to be a pretty fun game. I think we all kind of have this one somewhat close, um, but have a certain team taking a victory here. Um, Tyler has Clemson 31-23 in this ball game, so obviously winning and covering. But uh, you know, I thought this game late in the season was going to be somebody. I thought both these teams were going to be fighting for who would play Florida State in the ACC championship, and now the only team that has a chance needs help elsewhere, which is a game that we are going to talk about next. But Clemson, like you said, they kind of found something recently. They've started to click a little bit. Klubnik started to get a little bit more comfortable in the offense. They looked very good last weekend against Georgia Tech. And obviously they're home this weekend. Once again, North Carolina, I don't know what happened to this football team because after they beat Miami, they looked like a team that Tyler and I had as our ACC favorite, as a team that we thought could make the playoff, as a team that we thought could do all of these great things. And then the next 2 weeks, they get upset by Georgia Tech and Virginia, in the opposite order that I just said. I mean, Virginia, yeah, at the beginning of the season looked like one of the worst teams in the Power Five, and they've kind of found something a little bit recently, at least when it comes to being competitive in conference play. Same with Georgia Tech to an extent, but you can't lose those two games because ever since then, North Carolina's just looked like the same team that they have the past couple of years under Mac Brown, where they've got a fantastic offense, but the defense has just gaping holes, and it's been the same thing. Last week, they took on, I believe, Duke's third-string quarterback in a very interesting football game, like you said. Somehow came out with a victory. In double overtime, that game was a little bit wild, but this game, this game here for them, it's a road game, and it just kind of seems like two teams trending in different directions. Where North Carolina's trending pretty down right now, or at least plateauing after trending down, while Clemson is trending upward. They're obviously they can't make the ACC champ game, but they can salvage a season where they ended up going 8-4, which isn't bad by their standards. Well, it's bad by their standards, but it's not bad by ACC standards. That's a good season. Not what they wanted this year, but that's what's going to happen when you lose as much experience in certain positions over the past couple of years. It can happen for Clemson. It's gonna happen for Clemson. That's what happens to football teams. But I think it's more of a situation where they've struggled to adapt to the modern college football. I've voiced this many times when it comes to Dabo Swinney. A lot of people have voiced this many times when it comes to Dabo Swinney. But right now, I just think that the situation favors Clemson, and the line shows it accordingly. And for that reason, I'm going to go with Clemson in this ball game as well. I got it 30-21 for the Tigers. Super interesting game here, but another game, the other game that has importance this weekend in the ACC that will, with a win by Louisville, who currently sits at 10, who would have thunk that this year, in the college football playoff rankings. They travel to Miami. Emory Williams out for the season with that. I believe he tore his labrum in his left arm last week trying to dive for a ball. Very gruesome injury in that game against Florida State. They looked pretty solid. They've looked pretty solid with Emory Williams rolling at quarterback, so it seems like it's going to be Tyler Van Dyke's football team yet again in Miami. And they host this weekend against Louisville. They can, I think some people, obviously the playoff hopes are still somewhat alive for Louisville. Obviously, me, you, and Tyler kind of think that no matter what happens with Louisville, unless a Big Ten West team can win the Big Ten this year, we don't think that that Louisville really has a realistic chance, but they still have a chance to win the ACC this year, and they still have a chance to lock up a spot. Interesting game, interesting spot. What are your thoughts on this game?
This is a game that I'm going to go ahead and call kind of the college football special here. Miami last week, I thought that they were going to play a Super Bowl style game. Last week was their Super Bowl spot against FSU, um, and they got up for it. They're a good team. Miami is a good football team still, even though they're sitting here with what now 4 losses on the season. I think people that don't really understand what's going on there and don't understand the sport super well are kind of calling for Mario Cristobal to be on the hot seat. I think it's kind of ridiculous that there's even mention of that with how that team has played, with the improvement that they've shown from last year. But they played a Super Bowl spot game last week and kind of put it all out there against FSU. Um, when that happens, especially when you lose the Super Bowl spot game like that, but even if you win it, either way, when you play a game like that, you're going to be pretty vulnerable for next week. And that's just where they're at right now. Louisville's a good team. They're playing with a shot to go to the ACC title game to lock their spot in here, because of course they play out of conference in the final week of the season. Um, so, and again, like you mentioned, the quarterback injury there to Emory Williams. He put it all out there. Big props to the true freshman there. Pretty impressive. He put it all on the line for it, so good for him. Hate to see him go down like that, but I think he'll be back, and I think he's probably going to have a shot to get the keys to that offense next year going forward. I know that staff likes him a lot. But TVD is going to get the ball back, it sounds like. He's been banged up all year long, has played, not super great football. I think part of that is due to injury. I think part of that's due to just he has kind of regressed back a little bit from what he was a couple of years ago. So it's a weird spot though. I think Miami. There's a reason they last I at least saw they were favored in this game, and I think there's a reason for that. They might be the better football team here on paper, but we don't play games on paper. We play them on the field for obviously, and it's a spot. It's the spot that this game's happening in for both teams. One's going to be as up as they've been all year long to send themselves to the ACC title game, and one is coming off of the Super Bowl spot that they couldn't win, that they lost the quarterback in. It's just not a good place for Miami here. That's why I call it the college specials, because these games happen a handful of times a year. You see games like this, a lot of teams get one of these. And this is Miami's spot where it kind of happens to them. I just don't think that they're going to come out with nearly the energy that it's going to take to beat a determined Louisville team. Louisville will run the football, I would assume, with some high level of success here. I think that Miami team's worn down after last week. I think, I just don't think they're going to have what it takes to match up front in terms of just the energy and in terms of the mental level at this point. They're college kids. They're 18 to 22 years old. It's hard to play a game like you did last week and get back up the next week. That's how it happens in this sport. So I'm going to take Louisville to win this game. I think they're going to lean on Miami early and just kind of assert themselves and assert that it's time for them to put the season to rest in Coral Gables, and they'll be excited for next year to come around for sure. But I'm going to take Louisville here. I'm going to take it, 34-19. I think it's going to be kind of just a drain the rest of the life out of Miami this weekend.
So you have this game, the biggest margin, I will say. Tyler has Miami in this game, has Miami 20-17, a very close ball game, and I also have this game as a very close ball game. Obviously Miami is in a position where they're not in the best spot, but Louisville really isn't in the best spot either. They struggled heavily last weekend against Virginia at home. Granted, it was a midweek game, and obviously anything can happen in the ACC. It was your typical ACC football game that happened there. But the week before, Louisville, and what looked to be a really big letdown spot, absolutely destroyed Virginia Tech. So this team has played so inconsistent this year that I don't know. I don't really know what the heck to think of Louisville, which is the reason why I have them as low as my top 25 as I do, because I do respect that they are a top 25 team in the country, but I don't know what team I'm getting week in, week out. Louisville plays like a different team every single week. Like I said, one week they're playing like they could beat Florida State in the ACC championship, and the next week it looks like they're losing to one of the worst teams in the conference. It perplexes me. And I don't know what Louisville I'm going to get this week. I don't know if I'm going to get the Louisville that's going to sit there and that's absolutely going to, say, look, we got to win this game. We're in the ACC champ game. We can go win an ACC title this game. our college football playoff hopes aren't dead. Where I don't know if I'm going to get a Louisville team that's just going to play down, not even play down to competition, because like you said, on paper, Miami is a better football team, clearly, in this situation. But like you said, we play the games on a field, not on paper for a reason. Um, and Louisville has been a team that's top 10 team in the country. They've done it this year by running the ball and throwing it to thrash when they need to throw it. That's basically been their entire offense this year. Do I think that Louisville is a great football team this year? Absolutely not. Not by any stretch of the imagination. Really, the team that I have in second in the ACC, it's been a bounce because it looks like we're going to have a team that submits themselves, and then every week I get proven that it's Florida State and a bunch of heads. That's what I get proven every single week in this ACC. But, this is a big spot for Louisville. But for Miami, at this point, all they got to play for is pride. And going away from Emory Williams to me is a big, big thing in this game because TVD just kind of hasn't played very well this year. He's been fine. He played fine during the beginning of the season. Obviously, had that great game against Texas A&M when they won. But outside of that, he hasn't played very well. I mean, obviously, he was out the Clemson game, which allowed Williams to start. Williams played pretty well. I believe he was a 4-star freshman this year, was Williams. Definitely doesn't look like it, but looks more like he's Cam Rising. But still, he played very well this year in that position. But I don't know. This game just is really tough for me to read. And at the end of the day, what I think it comes down to is the fact that it's Tyler Van Dyke at quarterback. And I saw last week against Florida State, who I don't think has the best defense in the country. And I think Louisville has better defense than Florida State does personally. So what's he going to do against Louisville's defense? I don't know. I think this game is going to be very close. I think it's going to be so close that when I look at it, it's a certain team does technically cover, but it's a pick 'em in this situation. Basically, Miami's favored by 1, and I'm gonna switch it up here. I'm not gonna go with the team at home. I'm gonna go with Louisville in this ball game, by a hair. I think it's going to be a very, very close ball game. I got this one 27-26. Maybe a go-ahead field goal to win late. Maybe a 2-point conversion to win called by Jeff Brom when you need to. I don't know. Something about this game just gives me the vibes that it's going to probably be close. I don't know. It's a very weird spot. But now to our last game that we're going to cover this week. This game kind of has some importance, more so in the sense of Arizona. Arizona and Utah play. A ranked-on-ranked matchup, and we got this game on the Pac-12 network. So a total of 10 people will be able to see this game legally. But obviously we have our sources and our ways. We'll keep it quiet from there on out. But this is going to be a pretty decent ball game when you look at matchup-wise. Arizona this year playing like one of the better teams in the Pac-12. Utah, obviously, they kind of got a ceiling on what this team is going to be. This game is in Arizona. Arizona with a win. And it's a little bit of chaos. Still stays alive in their Pac-12 title hopes. So, anything can happen here. What are we thinking about this game, though, Blake?
Well, of course, I don't think any of us are those 10 people that can legally watch this game on Pac-12 networks. So, as you said, we'll have to tune in some different ways, of course. But because I'm excited for this game. I'm excited to watch this game. Arizona, I was extremely high on winning this season. I had them, I think, as a top 15 team coming in here. It took a little bit for them to get firing. They lost to Delore early, and you wondered if that was going to be part, kind of crumple them or cripple them, I should say. But Noah Fafita has came in and set the world on fire at Arizona, and it sounds as if Delore is back and healthy, and Fafita's not giving that job up. So I mean, he's taking the reins of that offense from here on. It seems so, and they've been great with them. They've been able to throw the ball around extremely well. Outside talent is there. They've got really solid receiving talent there. It's a really nice offense that Arizona's got, but I like what they've got defensively as well. I mean, they're not gonna be an elite defensive unit by any means, but for what they have out there in the Pac-12 right now, they are, bordering on a top 5 unit. They've shown, they have the ability to get into the backfield a little bit against the pass. Get pressure on the QB. They can get after the run a decent bit. They're not by any means a shabby defensive unit, and the only issue is they're running into a Utah team that has been clicking on all offensive cylinders for a month and a half now, it seems. So uh, these are two teams that have peaked at the right time and are finally rising to the occasion down the stretch. Utah, I kind of missed on the beginning of the season. I thought this team was not what most thought they were, but they've turned it around and they've hit their stride. So good on Kyle Whittingham to get that unit or that team up as well. Um, Utah's the more physical team here. I'm not going to sugarcoat that part. That's just it is. What it is. It's what you expect from Utah. It's how they match up against Arizona. Um, they're going to try to just kind of move that defense down the field, or move that defensive line down the field a little bit. They're going to try to run the football. I'm not sure what level of success they will have in the run game. Like I said, Arizona not by any means shabby against the run. But really, what their success has been in these past several weeks has been Bryson Barnes through the air and with his legs to an extent. Bryson Barnes has been able to extend plays and to make some plus plays happen with his legs when things break down. Really impressive out of him. He's shown a lot of improvement this year through the second half of the season from what he looked like in the first few games against Florida and against Baylor, especially. He struggled in that one. But he's shown some great improvement. The problem is at the end of the day is still, I've like I said, I was so high on this Arizona team coming into the season. And they finally have validated my thoughts on them after a while. They almost pulled the upset against USC, and then from there on, they've looked great after that game. They've kept clicking them away. So I'm gonna stick with the Wildcats here. I like what Jed Fish has done. I'm impressed with what that team has been able to accomplish. And I think it's going to keep rolling this weekend. I really do. I've got Arizona 23-20. I think it's going to be a close game. I think these offenses that they've clicked recently, I think we're going to keep this game a little low scoring. And I just think that Arizona's gonna find a way to pull this one out real close here.
Yeah, I think all three of us have this game pretty close. Me, you, and Tyler have it pretty close. But Tyler's score for this one, he's going with Utah in this one. He's going 28-24. I think he really liked what he saw from that Utah team last week, and kind of got a gauge of what Utah is this year. But he's going Utah 28-24. As for me, though, Arizona, it took me a while to warm up to this team. I thought that they were going to cover against USC, but that football game, that game was close. And then after that, I started to realize, dang, Arizona is actually a pretty darn good football team this year. And Arizona's been rolling kind of since then. Obviously, the Washington game, they were pretty close with that game throughout the year, or throughout that entirety. But, the USC game, they were right there. And obviously, a couple mistakes slip away late. Very close game. They got the win, though. They got the win against UCLA. They got the win. Colorado was a close game. I picked that upset, and Arizona State rolled out with the victory regardless, but good win for them. But when you look at Arizona this year, they've got those good wins. They had that win against Oregon State a couple weeks ago. That was a pretty good win for them. But when I look at this team and I look at Utah to me just kind of has a cap on this football team, and I don't think that cap is really going to switch at any time this year. And Arizona, I think, is a team that's still trending in an upward direction right now. Obviously, I have them in my top 15. I've had them in my top 15 for a while now. I think they're a very good football team this year. They're a very well-rounded team. Fifita, he's done very well at the quarterback position. And Barnes has started to find himself a bit at Utah, but I don't know. This game is out. It's in Arizona. It's a road game again for Utah. They're just coming off of a tough game against Washington. And for those reasons, I'm going to go Arizona tight in this game. I think that this team is more versatile than Utah is. I think that they're very similar when you look at them defensively, but I think Arizona has a little bit more oomph offensively, and I think they're going to get this job done, very similar to how they did against Oregon State. I'm going to go 27-23 in this one, Arizona to take the victory. That'll be my pick for that. That'll wrap up our picks for this week. Blake, I will turn it over to you now because it's time for the upset of the week. What is your upset this week?
Yeah, quick shout here before I throw my upset out there. Quick shout to the Miami Redhawks, MAC East champions. They pulled it off. They knocked off Buffalo last night in Oxford at Yager Stadium on senior night. Some great weekday action we saw. So Miami with that win, we've clinched a spot in MAC East or in the MAC championship game. They will face off in a rematch against Toledo here in a couple weeks. But shout out to the Redhawks, my alma mater. Great win there and great season for that team. At least a 9-win season. Hopefully going for 10 next week, though. But, yeah, to my upset pick here, I'm going to go. We got a fun game here. FAU is playing Tulane this week. FAU, I think, 9.5-point dogs, as long as nothing has changed. That's what I saw at last. Tulane's looked susceptible last couple of weeks. They've played a lot of close football games. I'm going to take FAU here, Tom Herman and the Owls. I think they're going to pull a sneaky upset here.
So you're going with that as your upset of the week. Tyler's upset of the week, he's going with Baylor over TCU and the rivalry this weekend. As for me, I kind of struggled on mine this week. I almost went with Texas and Iowa State, but obviously I picked Texas, so I'm not going to go with that one. But I'm going to go with another one that's pretty interesting. SMU has been rolling recently, which has been noticed in Tyler's top 25s as of recent, but they're taking on Memphis this weekend. That game's in the Liberty Bowl, going to be an interesting game. Memphis is an 8.5 dog at home. Both those teams 8-2 this year. I'm going to roll with Memphis in this ball game. I think that line's just a little bit too big. So I'm going to go with Memphis. Obviously the lowest dog that we're going with this week that we've had really in a while, but it didn't really seem like there was a dog that I liked that had a wider range this week, so I'm going to go with that as my upset of the week, and that will wrap up this episode of the Orbit Football Podcast. Unfortunately, like I said, Tyler was unable to join us today, but Blake and I went through our preview of Week 12. Next week, rivalry week, we're going to be back at it. Obviously, we kind of previewed a little bit of what our show schedule is going to be next week, so make sure to stay tuned and be excited for those ones. Follow us on our social medias, on our Twitter, on our Instagram. Make sure you can watch these videos on Spotify, YouTube, wherever you'd like. But for Blake, this is Cade signing off. You've been listening to the Orbit Football Podcast.